This channel is only possible thanks to direct contributions from you, the viewers. Seriously, thank you guys. If you'd like to contribute, you can do so for as little as $1 a month on Patreon, or come pick up a t-shirt at the merch store. Links below. Hey gamers. So in part 3 of our in-depth look into the Homestuck Extended Zodiac and the Aspect Wheel, we're going to be looking at my friend and patron Arrghus's theory on the Aspect Zodiac. I describe this as the most fleshed out theory on aspects that I've seen so far, and in fact served as the foundation for a lot of the ideas I presented in parts 1 and 2 of this series. So I'd personally recommend going back and watching the prior two and seeing if you can't make more sense out of the aspect relationships implied there after watching this one, which I suppose makes this series something of a Mobius triple reach around? Arrghus presents their theories in the form of 4 medium essays. In the interest of full disclosure, I actually wrote the mutable aspects section with some notes from Arrghus. In this video, I'll be presenting a somewhat paraphrased compilation of these essays, but I still suggest reading the originals if you're interested. Links in the doobly-doo. So, let's dive in. The world of Homestuck is made of dualities, stark contrasts that get mixed and remixed over and over again all over paradox space. One of those dualities is the separation of idea and matter. This is a world where ideas become real. Grist is the conceptual substance of an argument turned actual substance, to be collected and stored. Alchemy then recombines the underlying ideas behind existing objects and fills the conglomerate notions with grist, to make them real as well. Even the aspects themselves are suffused with this duality, operating as both feelings and ideas, but also properties of very real objects and events. Void is found in the sensation of irrelevance and the loneliness of being ignored, but it's also found in pumpkins, horses, and the image of the deep sea. In this way, each of the 12 aspects manifests both philosophically and physically. For more on that duality, check out Text Talk's video series on the aspects. The upper section of the wheel, filled with bright and breezy colors, is the domain of the ideal principle, filled with aspects more closely connected to the notion of paradox space as a world of ideas. At its peak is breath, the aspect of thought unfettered by any uncertainties or worries for the concerns of the material world. Breath has an obvious connection with air as far as the classical elements go, and air is historically associated with intellectual disattachment from the world and the power of reason and thought. Consider the monastic, intellectual lifestyles of the air nomads in Avatar, for example. Those wielding the notional aspect have an ability to perceive what might be, what is desired, or what is simply made up, and then strive to make it reality. Hope and Mind make this pretty obvious. Jake can outright create things entirely out of his own imagination, while Terezi's powers revolve almost exclusively around her ability to think and perceive her reality inside her own head. But we also find this focus with, for example, John's long-winded theoretical exploration of ghosts and aliens as byproducts of religion and science as entirely fictional entities when confronted with an alien ghost right in front of him in reality. We can look to Feferi and Jane's general attitudes of optimistic confidence in their ability to reshape reality according to the ideal worlds they see in their heads, or the way the light players are absolutely obsessed with stories and storytelling. The bottom section of the wheel, filled with darker and drearier imagery, is the domain of the material, filled with aspects more closely connected to the notion of paradox space as a world of matter. At its bottom is found blood, the aspect of warriors and fretters, the most notable of which is the ever-complicated fact that other people exist independently of you and have their own personalities and desires that don't always coincide with your own. This, then, is the material world. It is solid, it is real. not to be dreamed up as possibility or flight of fancy and then discarded just as quickly. Dirk fights constantly to rid himself of the aspects of his personality that he dislikes, but finds he can't escape them. Equius's very body is of such intensity that he can't help but cause consequence on everything he touches, and his presence repels the omniscience of Doc Scratch, erasing his environment from the notional. Solux is constantly concerned not with what might come to pass, but with what will, and pays a steep price whenever he tries to change it to his liking. And Cardcat is pretty much constantly busy bringing things back into reality with reminders of time limits and the need for teamwork. Gamzee's path through this is one of struggle, of course, as he uses Sopor and the power of delusion to hide from the truth of what his gods demand from him. Remember that the truth that Lord English represents is self-evident. Gamzee doesn't need to believe in Lord English, because he's already extremely real. But it's a mistake to decide the ideal aspects are wholly positive, or the material aspects wholly negative. One need only look at Trickster mode to see how toxic and destructive obsessive positivity can be, but that would also ignore the fact that the physical world is where, well, reality happens. Ideals and fantasy might be terrific motivators for the human spirit, but they aren't actually reality as such. And while physical reality does contain limits and flaws that cause suffering, I prefer to think of it as a sort of play space, where every conscious agent can introduce their own ideas into the community and world around them, and imaginations clash and combine to produce new things. I'm reminded of this bit of Hussey commentary from the Homestuck books, where he comments on Jade's scribble pad modus, describing it as hinting at the underlying logic of Homestuck's universe. In his wording, it's a universe not so much of physics as of discrete ideas, and devices that trade in these platonic concepts can understand nothing else. When the user scribbles something, the system will search for not only that which it knows, but that which can only be known to anyone. There's nothing in between, nothing more subtle. So basically, in Homestuck, the ideal generally represents everything that our collective unconscious is trained to recognize, whereas the physical world is where conceptual nuance begins to happen. For a quick example of this, imagine the mythical ideas of the classes as platonic forms that exist in the world of the imaginary, and individual players as figures that exist in the real world, and blur and mix the lines between these archetypes as they construct both their own identities and their individual heroic legacies. But I'm afraid that's all we have time for this time around. So I'll be cutting things off here, and next time we'll be discussing the passive to active, or cold to hot, division between the aspects. I hope you look forward to it, and until then, keep rising. Huge thanks go out to my patrons for making this video possible. If you want to help support the channel and come join us at our awesome and growing Discord community, feel free to join us for as little as $1 a month. You can also find me on the r/Hiveswap Reddit and Discord. That's all for now, so thank you again, and as always, keep rising.